In this second phase of national movement, there emerged a new and younger group of leaders within the Congress who did not agree with the methods and ideology of the early nationalist leaders. These angry young men stood for complete Swaraj to be achieved by more self-reliant methods. They also wanted to have a mass base for their movement. This group of leaders came to be known as Assertive Nationalists. They were so called because they had a different outlook that advocated active resistance to British imperialism. They condemned the British rule in India and held it responsible for the country's downfall. They called upon the people of India to make sacrifices for the sake of their country. Three prominent leaders of this group were Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai, and Bipin Chandra Pal. They are famous as the Lal Bal Pal. Causes for the rise of assertive nationalism: recognition of the true nature of the British rule. The efforts made by the early nationalist leaders through their writings, agitation, and petitions to the British government exposed the true character of the British rule in India. It was felt that the British rule was responsible for the economic ruin of India and her growing poverty. Some of the political events from 1892 to 1905, like the reduction in the number of Indian members in the Calcutta Corporation, the restrictions on the press, etc., made Indians realize that instead of giving them more rights, the British were taking away even their few existing rights. All this convinced the Indians that India could not make progress unless British imperialism was replaced by a government run by them. Thus, the assertive nationalist ideology found favor with the masses. Failure of the early nationalists. The younger elements within the Congress were dissatisfied with the achievements of the early nationalists. They strongly criticized the methods of peaceful constitutional agitation. The assertive nationalists advocated the adoption of European revolutionary methods to meet British imperialism. The early nationalists were loyal to the crown, and their political objective was to improve their chances of getting seats in the central provincial legislatures or judicial services. The assertive nationalists accused the early nationalists of limiting their activities to the middle class of the society. The failure of the early nationalists to get something substantial from the British government led to the demand for more vigorous political action using a radical approach. The third point is the worsening economic conditions. The evil economic consequences of foreign rule was exposed towards the end of the 19th century, when there were famines which ravaged India from 1896 to 1900 and took a toll of over 90 lakhs lives. The government did nothing to help the people. On the other hand, it spent a huge amount of money on the Silver Jubilee celebrations of Queen Victoria's accession to the throne. These events revealed to the Indians their plight of utter helplessness. They attributed all this to anti-national policies followed by the British government. The worsening economic condition of the people and the unjust and repressive policies of the British provided a congenial atmosphere for the growth of assertive nationalism. The fourth point was the need for mass action. The assertive nationalist leaders taught the people that the remedy to their sad condition lay in their own hands. This belief in self-effort created an urge for extending the national movement to the masses. Swami Vivekananda said, "The only hope of India is from the masses." The upper classes are physically and morally dead. Thus, there was the realization that only the masses could make the immense sacrifices needed to win freedom. The fifth point was the growing consciousness among Indians. The nationalist writers and agitators blamed the British rule for the poverty of the people. Leaders of this new ideology made all efforts to develop self-respect and self-confidence among the people. Assertive nationalist leaders like Aurobindo Ghosh, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai and Bipin Chandra Pal asked the nationalists to rely on the abilities of the Indians. Bipin Chandra Pal reminded the people that self-help and self-sacrifice is a real force in the field of nationalism. The next point is the influence of international events. Assertive nationalism was inspired by the examples of international events. For the first time, Japan, an Asian country, defeated Russia. Italian forces were defeated by the Abyssinians in Ethiopia. In South Africa, the Boers fought for 3 years against the British Empire. In Ireland, people were waging a full-scale home rule agitation. These events broke the myth of the invincibility of the Europeans. The assertive nationalists felt that the united masses could throw out the British yoke. The next point is the ill treatment of Indians abroad. Indians had helped the British to develop their colonies in other parts of the world. But everywhere, especially in South Africa, Indians were subjected to racial discrimination. They were denied the right to vote and could not enter the hotels, clubs, buses or railway coaches reserved for the whites. The discriminatory treatment towards the Indians in British colonies was resented by the Indians, and this led to the rise of assertive nationalism. The next is the existence of a nationalist school of thought. A school of nationalism had existed in the country from almost the beginning of the national movement. This school was represented by leaders like Raj Narayan Bose and Ashok Kumar Dutt in Bengal and Vishnu Shastri Chiplunkar in Maharashtra. These nationalists found an opportunity to lead the second stage of the national movement at the dawn of the 20th century. The most outstanding assertive leaders were Lokmanya Tilak, Bipin Chandra Pal, Aurobindo Ghosh and Lala Lajpat Rai. These leaders considered no personal sacrifice too great for the good of their country. They declared Swaraj or independence as the goal of the national movement and directed all their energy towards achieving the goal. The next is the growth of education and unemployment. The number of educated Indians increased considerably by the close of 19th century. Large number of them were employed in the administration on low salaries, while many others faced unemployment. Their grievances made them look critically at the nature of the British rule. These educated, low-paid or unemployed Indians became the followers of assertive nationalism. The 10th point is the repressive policies of Lord Curzon. Lord Curzon's 7-year rule in India was full of repressive measures. He refused to recognize India as a nation. He was not in favor of giving freedom to India because he believed that the English were destined to rule over India. Therefore, he took several repressive measures to crush Indian nationalism. These measures included, number 1, the Act of 1898, which made it an offence to provoke people against the British. Number 2, the Calcutta Cooperation Act 1899, which reduced the strength of elected members from India, thereby giving the British a majority. Number 3, the Official Secrets Act Number 4, the Indian Universities Act of 1904, which imposed strict official control over the Indian universities because Curzon considered them as the centers of nationalism. All these measures created resentment in India. And the last cause for the rise of assertive nationalism was the Partition of Bengal. It was a decision taken by Lord Curzon in 1905. The reason cited by him for this decision was administrative convenience. However, the Indians believed that Lord Curzon's real intention was to divide the Hindu and the Muslim nationalists. The decision resulted in widespread protests and agitation. The people protested and launched the Swadeshi and boycott movements. All protests were put down with severe repressive methods. Curzon's disregard for public opinion gave ample evidence that the early nationalists' policy of petitions, prayers and protests could not produce any results. So more assertive methods had to be adopted.